I would love to invite Arica, Susan, and David, our panelists, to join us here today. Oops, I think I'm on this side. Coming up. All right. So music rights matter. So as John nicely laid out for us right before this, there's a lot of value in the music industry and it continues to grow. Music rights matter because they are essentially the foundation of how a lot of us get paid at the end of the day. I would love to invite our panelists to introduce themselves, name, what you do, and just a little fun thing. What do you spend most of your day doing? Arica, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. I probably know some of you. So my name is Arica. I am the president of Warner Chappell Asia. So I run all the offices across Asia. The fun fact, I'm not too sure if everybody know, I'm a huge fan of a Taiwanese band called Loiterton, and they are also one of our partners. So a shout out to any fans here if you like Loiterton. I have chased them all around the world going to gigs and all. So I love what I'm doing because, fangirling can be a career. So I love it. Yeah, that's me. Thank you.
That's funny that you say that. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Cotchin. I'm the founder and the managing director of Good Neighbour Rights, which is a neighbouring rights company. We've been going for probably about 25 years and now have a joint venture with the Mushroom Group, which some of you may have heard of in Australia. Fun. Okay, my job is fun. I love music. I'm so immersed in music. And so what do I do in my spare time when I'm not working? Music. I listen to music. So I guess that's why I've been doing this for so long.
I get that.
I left you for last, David, so you could think about it a minute.
Yeah, I needed to think about that. I'm David Loiterton, president of Primary Wave for Indo and Asia Pacific. Photography. That's my fun thing.
That's a nice adjacent industry.
It's related.
Wonderful. So, music rights matter, but a lot of people don't realize that there is a broad spectrum of rights that can be collected upon. And understanding these better can really help everybody unlock some very valuable revenue worldwide. So, Susan, I think neighboring rights is possibly one of those group of rights that people know the least about. Having worked with a lot of master owners myself in the past, not very many were aware. So would you mind kind of talking through what are neighboring rights? What are examples of different types of businesses that pay for the use of music? And how do they differ in some of the key markets?
Yeah, sure. Neighbouring rights, if you're here to hear about publishing, don't come and talk to me. I'm on the sound recording side of things, and some people call that the dark side. So, but we're here, this is all to do with the copyright and the sound recording. Since 1997, this right came about where performers now enjoy 50% performer share, the neighbouring rights share, of the public performance of the sound recording. So anytime you hear Adele on the radio as a performer, as opposed to a songwriter, both the rights holder receives their 50% share and Adele would receive her 50% share as a performer. So you can get obviously a performer who has never written songs. I think, someone like Whitney Houston is probably a great example of that. Where she wasn't earning money as a result of being a songwriter, but certainly money as a result of being a performer. And if you think about the contribution that someone like Whitney Houston has made as an incredible musician, an incredible performer, it's right that she should be paid as a performer, as a contributor to the sound recording, because the sound recording is more than zeros and ones. It's certainly about that creative talent. So that's why neighbouring rights exists. I could go into detail about that, but I won't. But I think in a nutshell, that's the best way to explain neighbouring rights.
So do you say radio is like one of the most popular channels that pay these types of rights? What are some of the other 2 or 3 that people may not kind of recognize but realize but actually do?
Certainly it was based on the AM/FM terrestrial right that I love. Certainly the US Sound Exchange came about in 2005, which most of you are familiar with, which was based on digital because obviously they don't have a copyright in the sound recording. We're not a signatory to the Rome Convention. So that's based on digital. Of course, public performance clubs, venues, that sort of thing as well. Karaoke, huge here, obviously.
Wonderful. And what types of organizations do these companies typically pay out to?
Well, we call them CMOs as opposed to PROs. That always gets people confused. Essentially, there's a lot of CMOs that are set up by rights holders, have always been around. So certainly in the UK, we have PPL, kind of the most well-known, that's been set up since the 1920s to collect on behalf of rights holders. And then, of course, since the right came about, they were also, because they were already collecting on the master side, they then pay across that performer share as well. So you can see they're really, in bed with each other in relation to the sound recording. And across the world, of course, MRSS set up here in Singapore. There's PPCA in Australia that collects on behalf of rights holders. And essentially, again, these organisations, the board usually consists of rights holders and maybe a couple of performer members to keep them honest.
Wonderful. Thank you for that nice little introduction and breakdown.
Thank you.
David, we're going to move on to you because you kind of straddle two worlds in what you do. Question is, how much content and what type of content do people need to own in order to work with a company like Primary Wave?
So, firstly, I think I'd just take a step back, and I think the point of what we're all going to say, in the next half an hour is that if you're a creator, there are lots of different types of rights that can earn you money, whether it's publishing, writer share, recording, artist share, producer, neighboring rights, it goes on and on and on, right? So for us, and we're not a traditional publisher in the same way that Warner Chappell is, we're an investor. We invest and partner with artists and catalogue owners and estates and what have you. And we look for ways to grow the value of those rights. And that's through marketing. So your question was what type and how many, right? So what type is everything. So everything is master recordings, publishing. People forget about important things like name and likeness.
Absolutely. I mean, here
Right.
it's a huge deal as well.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So for sponsorship and brand relationships and those types of things, we are involved a lot with estates. You mentioned Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston is one of our partners. And of course, it's her estate, the Prince estate, the Ray Charles estate, the James Brown estate. And so with estates in particular, it's also archives. So artists and creative people collect things, over the years, and those archives become a really important part of how you can market them. And you don't have to have died to market your archives, right? So archives are memorabilia and things like that. So, these are, maybe they're not rights so much, but they're in the ecosystem of as a creator, what you can exploit to generate revenue.
That's wonderful. I mean, the reason this panel is so interesting is because all three of you really do such different things, controlling and managing different types of rights. So to your point, David, like you mentioned, there's like different types of content and different ways you work with them. Could you elaborate a little bit more about like how you would work with something that is a bit more active and current versus, say, an estate catalog?
Okay, you mean living versus not living, or young versus
or active versus
legacy?
passive,
Because there's different, different ends, right?
Yeah.
So we tend to work with legendary, iconic repertoire. So some of the people I just mentioned. A little bit of what we do relates to new music, and that's really because not because we think it's necessarily a good investment, because it's very risky. but because we want to remain involved with the A&R community, because part of the way that you're exploiting old copyrights is with cover versions, samples, stems, all that sort of stuff. So working with new artists coming through. So that's important. You're bridging the gap between the old and the new, and bringing older copyrights into the consciousness of the new generation. Right? Streaming allows us to do that. But that's one part of it. The philosophy for us is everything is about marketing. Everything is about growing value. So, and look, to be honest, we're unusual. It's hard to do some of the things that we do, but you can do it if you can access resources. So we, at the top end of the scale, we're building a venue for Bob Marley, for example. We invested in the film for Whitney Houston. Those are big, expensive things, but they're great marketing vehicles for generating revenue for the artist. But on a day-to-day level, it's sync, it's working the digital side of things. So a lot of the catalogs and artists that we invest in might be older, pre-digital. So a lot of the repertoire's not on the platforms. It's not on all the platforms. The metadata's not right. They're not in the right playlists. They're not on social media. You'd be surprised how many people are not on social media at that end of the spectrum. So there's a lot of, what we would all regard as just day-to-day work that we do to bring these older catalogs back into the 21st century. And then you're doing things like working with film and television, brand partnerships, and those types of things to really look for value.
I think those are really, really great points, and really great for people to realize that we can look beyond music products when you control music rights to find ways to monetize. Like the venue one was really, really interesting idea. Arica, over to you, because you're more from the publishing, straight up publishing world today. But prior to that, and when I met you, you actually worked on the other side of the business, doing licensing for digital streaming platforms. You've worked for a fair amount of them, actually. How has your past experience doing licensing on the platform side helped you in what you do today on representing publishing?
Right. So yes, we go way back, but we don't tell people how many years. I remember my very first job, close to 2 decades ago. First music job is actually Singtel. Shout out to my homeland. I was selling ringtone. So, and then I move on to hardware company, and then I was last with YouTube and with Meta, that is all about advertising and creator-based monetization. But end of the day, music is as music is. To me, it's just a matter of a format. And I think having a person who has been negotiating all different kinds of deals on the publishing side, on your side, I think that's a benefit. Because I'm like, are you telling me my pitch to me? Like, change it. So I think that's good. But also because I think what's important is we are meeting in the middle. You have content people going to tech, and you have tech coming into content. End of the day, we are in the intersection. We talk about the new world. We talk about, a common language of, if we imagine this to be, what will be the terms and what will be the regulations, guardrails. Let's talk about it. We are no longer at the odd ends. We are actually meeting in the middle. And I really, really like that. So I hear that Warner Chappell is being referred as a traditional publisher. So end of the day, if I take traditional what it is, we are more than a century old. And then I also hear that the business of investing into new music is actually deemed as risky, but we do that with pride. We do that with pleasure. And because we invest into making new music, if no one takes a chance on a new guy, new girl, new them, there will be no new music and no new legacy for you to buy 50 years down the road. So we are
100% correct.
So we are definitely going into embracing that portion of we are traditional. We would like to continue making new music, and I know there's a few writers and students. If you want to have a chat, this is always my plug. I do it at every single Music Matters. Look for me. My name is Arica, and I run Warner Chappell.
That's wonderful. I mean, I think, this, again, like what I was saying, you guys represent such different areas of the industry, which makes it a really holistic panel. But Arica, you mentioned, obviously you have catalog as well, right? You've got catalog you represent from artists that are no longer proactively pushing, as well as a lot of very current things.
Yes.
So what are the different ways specifically that you work with different types of content within the Warner Chappell ecosystem? And not just content, I guess creators as well.
Yeah, and I think this goes back old school when we always look at A&R, we have to put artists first. It's artists and repertoire. So it's a little bit too simplified to think of catalog as in legacy, old, but everybody have adult issues. I could be 22 and I need money. Then you will be looking at maybe selling it off. So everybody has a different need. So I don't really look at legacy or catalog. I look at what the person needs. So if you are someone new and if you want to join a song camp, we'll be like, good. So what kind of music do you want to play? What do you want to do? But if you need money to buy a house, and I get a lot of that. As they turn 30 something, they need to buy a house and I say, okay, are you sure this is what you want to do? Let's talk about numbers. And then at the end of the spectrum will be, oh, you want to set up a company now. So instead of a writer, you want to be a OP? Let's talk about it. So you realize that what we do is the person first. It's not really the catalog. Catalog follow the person, not the other way around. At least that's how the amateur of 2 hours, the amateur of 2 years in publisher looks at the business.
No, it's very wonderful, and it's terrific for your artist to know that you are doing that in such a public way, which is great. All right, Susan, we're going to go over to you now. Obviously, we're in a global world. We are all here in Singapore. Most of us are not from here, except for Arica and I, but don't even live here anymore. But in this ever kind of global world where you see artists collaborating a lot more with other artists, this is where kind of rights management gets even more tricky and that much more important to understand and manage properly. So how does that work? When you have artists, how do you help artists collaborating with other artists properly collect and pay out?
That's a big question. But thank you for that, Arica. I loved how you said this, you're looking after the person first. And certainly neighbouring rights is an individual performer right. And I think a lot of people aren't across that when it comes to neighbouring rights, that essentially this is a right that performers have that is not transferable. Essentially they have this, it is a non-exclusive right, but they have this right to be able to say, so a record company can't come in and say, okay, we're going to take this from you. This is a non-transferable right in order that they can collect as an individual. So when we go in and we represent, let's say, a band, we're not actually representing the band, we're representing the individual performer and anything they have ever contributed to in their life. So fast forward to your question in terms of collaboration. You can obviously get the lead singer of a band who then goes out and does a lot of other collaborations. Obviously a solo artist that does a lot of collaborations. We see a lot of remix artists that come in and take a track and remix that track. And then we have to think about what kind of contribution they've made. In the US, a lot of people are across this thing called an LOD, which is a producer basically putting together a letter of direction that says, hey, we deserve this amount of points because we've just produced this record. And so we get a lot of these in front of us where the producer or our artist is saying, okay, we now need to pay this across. And the difficult thing with neighbouring rights is the legislation can be different in all sorts of territories. If I was just to take Australia, for example, having a producer trying to take a share of the rights belonging to a performer in Australia, they actually don't qualify because Australia only pays Australians, which is insane.
How interesting.
Yeah, so you have to be, there's no reciprocity in Australia with the rest of the world, something we're working on. But essentially, if you get a US producer who's remixed something, you've got an agreement that you've done with an attorney in the US, and they're like, yeah, you deserve to have this share. and then they come and they say, hey, give us our money from Australia. It's like Australia only pays featured performers, not even their non-featured performers. They're not going to pay you. That's just not going to happen. So the contract's just not going to stand up. So that's one example of where people get really confused, which, but again, being on the ground in neighbouring rights for so many years is one of those things that you have to be across as an agent to be able to understand, those complexities of being able to represent a performer when it comes to collaboration. Another great example is, let's say you get an artist, a big artist, and they feature. So featuring a particular artist, they feature on a track of a big artist. Now that other artist may not qualify in that territory. So in other words, if a performer doesn't qualify in a territory, let's say one performer qualifies and the other performer doesn't qualify, what happens there? So the performer that doesn't qualify, their share would end up going back to the record label if they didn't, if they didn't know how to claim it. So there are different ways of slicing that, third-party agreements, performer share agreements, that kind of stuff, to try and get that money off the table and paid to the qualifying performer, and then paid onwards via a third-party agreement to the performer who doesn't qualify. So I know that sounds complex, but it is a way that, like, performers have to jump through a lot of loopholes that record companies don't have to jump through in order to get this money. And it really, when people come and talk to me about a situation or a collaboration, the most important thing is that they come and talk to us first, and we can advise them. This is how you could qualify, or this is a way that we could do a different type of agreement to enable you to get as much money off the table as you should be getting before it goes back to the rights holder. So it's having those conversations. It's understanding that performers, unlike rights holders, have to jump through these hoops in order to get the money. So essentially, because it's a non-exclusive right.
I like what you mentioned as well, like, come talk to me first. And I think that's just across the board a really good piece of advice, because, especially when managing rights, it's much easier to manage when you get ahead of it than when something goes viral and then you start squabbling with your bandmates about who owns what and your producer about who owns what, right?
Yeah, once the money starts flowing, it's a much more
it's
complex,
much trickier conversation.
situation.
I know, right? And then, also like I'm more familiar on the PRO side, and like I know that over the years of globalization, they've got like agreements to move money between different global societies. How does it work on the CMO side? Do they have a system of exchanging?
Kind of. So IP is supposed to be a harmonious right. We're all supposed to get along, and we should. What's interesting, though, is often these CMOs, as I said, this is a share of the income that record companies have always received this income, and they've had these bodies that are set up to collect the money across the world. Obviously, since they had to start, giving up this 50% performer share, it was like, well, how can we claw that back? So my time in the UK, I used to work for a company called PAMRA, Performing Artists Media Rights Association. Sorry, so many acronyms. But the important thing there is that we were set up by the Musicians Union when this right came about. And what we did is we would go to PPL and say, give us all our money for the performers, give it to us. So they would pay that across, and we would, pay it out. PAMRA was taken over by PPL, I think in 2005 or something like that. And then PPL, obviously, we're now getting an admin fee of that, the performer share, so still getting a clip of it, and set up lots of reciprocal agreements across the world to basically say, hey, you could join PPL, get your money from across the world as a performer, because they've been doing it on the rights holder side. The problem with that is, as I just mentioned, one example of Australia where US sound recordings don't qualify. So Beyonce being played on radio in Australia, the radio station is not paying anything for the use of that sound recording, yet alone Beyonce. The UK sound recordings, essentially that's not going via PPL because there's no reciprocal agreement. So there's a lot of complexity in terms of you think you can go to one CMO and collect all your money, either as a rights holder or even as a performer, because they're very aggressive and they're in competition with each other and they're trying to get a clip of, both the performer share and the rights holder share. Whilst there might be, data transferred and available, you're dealing with countries that don't have the capacity or the technology to be able to pay this money out, pay this across. So often, unless you go direct to each country, which is of course what we do, you can't make those claims for performers. You can't go in and add a performer to a sound recording. It doesn't happen as a result of just registering to a CMO, and then that CMO has relationships with all the other CMOs and says, hey, give us all the money for Beyonce, because it just won't be there. You have to go in to that country and say, hey, we know Beyonce Knowles was on all these tracks, give us our money. In the same way that PAMRA did all those years ago, like a musicians union type organization, which is, what a lot of good agents do. They go in and they say, give us our money. She's entitled to this money for this, and this reason. So reciprocity between CMOs exists, but there's a lot of smoke and mirrors around it.
Wow, very interesting. Thank you for sharing. And I mean, it seems like a lot of groundwork, but it's good to know that there are organizations that can do this work for you or on your behalf. David, I know you mentioned marketing and that a big part of what you do is really marketing the content. But just on a base level to start with, what are some recurring revenue streams that content owners should be mindful of and make sure that they're collecting properly, and how do they do that?
Well, recurring revenue streams basically is anything that you're not out actively creating, like sync, for example. But even sync can end up being a recurring revenue stream. I think what you're getting at is, and it's not a space that we're in. We subcontract to companies like Chappell, exactly, and Good Neighbour. But I think you're getting at sort of the nuts and bolts
Yes.
of getting your money.
Correct.
And, that is obviously going to be registrations, metadata, all the boring stuff.
Not boring. Very exciting. We need to
It's
change the narrative
really-
about
we love
really
it.
making rights more exciting, because at the end of the day, this is a lot of reason why people don't
Oh, absolutely.
pay attention to it.
Yeah, you have to pay attention to it. It's the boring but important stuff.
What about the sound? Ka-ching!
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good sound.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to do it. You've got to do the registration. You've got to make sure your metadata's right. You've got to read your statements. You've got to cross-check. You've got to challenge. You've got to do all that stuff. Even as an artist, or a writer, even at the end of the chain. And, Chappell's done their job. Good Neighbour's done their job. And, you get your royalty statement. You still have to read it. You still have to challenge it. You still have to check it, even though it might be 50 pages long. You have to do it.
Yeah.
It's your responsibility. Because the reality is that, along the way of the food chain, mistakes happen. PROs are not perfect. CMOs are not perfect. None of us, are perfect in an admin world. It's really, really difficult. So, you have to take responsibility for it.
Yeah,
and it's hard.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think also, one of the wonderful things about coming to conferences like this is that it reminds you that there is an entire ecosystem, right? So a lot of artists kind of go to one entity or one person and assume that there is a lot more that person can do for you or that entity can do for you than they actually can. So, I mean, to help kind of break this down a little bit, David, like you mentioned, you work with companies like Susan's and you work with companies like Arica's. Can you kind of give us a couple of the key types of companies that you work with in what you do today and how you work with them?
Well, again, we're a little bit different because we focus on the marketing side, and so we outsource a lot of these really important but administrative functions to companies like Chappell and Good Neighbour. And that's just our strategy, just so that we can focus on marketing. But, even on the marketing side, you're still generating revenue in these different places. And so, as I said before, spending time and doing a digital audit of your repertoire, whether it's new or whether it's old, and making sure that it's on all of the platforms, that all the data is correct, that it's in the correct playlists. Social media, same thing. I said before, you'd be surprised the number of people that are just not on YouTube. It's like, how does that happen? But it's because people are time constrained, particularly if you're a sort of self-employed artist trying to do it all for yourself, which is just
A lot of artists,
horrendous.
yes,
But,
yes.
when I started in the business, the only way to be a musician, an artist, was to get a record company deal. And so you sort of abrogated some of that responsibility to record companies who may or may not have been looking after your best interests. These days, as an artist, you have to take responsibility, unfortunately, for yourself. And so you've got to do all the digital work. You've got to do all the social media work. You've got to check your statements. You've got to do everything. And that's a huge workload for a young artist who actually just wants to be creative and
Yeah,
write
absolutely.
music.
Absolutely. Go
I
ahead,
was just going to say that I was watching the Empire panel, and Ghazi summed it up, and he said, you need to know enough about something, bring in the experts, but you need to know enough about it to be able to ask the right questions, to be able to understand what they're talking about, to, of course, be able to make the decisions whether that company is right for you. So
I take it a step further.
Absolutely.
You need to know something about everything.
A little
Something
bit,
about
just to know who to
Yeah.
hire, who
Yeah,
an expert
exactly.
is, right? Because a lot of people will go around and claim that they are experts on lots of different things that they may not be. But that was a really good, I'm glad you brought that up. David, I'm going to do one more before we move to Arica, and this is entirely in your wheelhouse. What are proactive ways that you work with your content? I just wanted to give that foundation before
Sure.
we got
Thank
to
you.
the fun stuff.
Thank you. Again, we're slightly different. We have a different business model, so it's not for everybody. But and because we, predominantly work with older catalog, that's just our strategy. It's not right or wrong. It's just what we do. But the areas that we, really like to spend time are in the fun areas. The fun areas are, you got to do the digital audit, and yes, you got to make sure you're on all the social media platforms. That goes without saying. But the fun areas are places like film and TV, that are not really normally in a music company's wheelhouse, but they're great vehicles. And we've all seen the biopics and the documentaries that are coming out. So we do that, and we do musicals. The ABBA
Musical
hologram
side,
thing,
I was going
which
to
is,
say, the musical side is really exciting as
fantastic.
well.
And these are great vehicles, not only for those copyrights, those great songs to, have another life. It's also a way for new generations to experience them, different demographics, and they're fantastic marketing vehicles for the music. So we love doing things like that. Those are really in our wheelhouse. There's some areas that, is really a personal choice. Holograms, for example, are very much a personal choice. Some people like them, some people don't. Some people think they're tacky, some people, love them. The technology's only going to get better, and we will get to the point where it'll be almost impossible to tell, and, we'll all love it. But for the moment, it's still on the fence. Brand partnerships, again, are very personal. Some artists, and again, when I started, you just didn't do it. It was super uncool to have a brand partnership. But now you have to.
Almost necessary.
Almost
There's
necessary.
a lot of artists.
Exactly, absolutely. And so, brand partnerships is something that we also spend a lot of time on. And, you need specialist people and specialist understanding, because brands are not music people. They're trying to sell toothpaste and all that other stuff. So
Absolutely.
and there's many other areas, but those are some of the things that we like to do.
Oh, those are great. Thank you. Arica, over to you to wrap up this panel. Is how much of what you do, I know you're all artist-focused and artist-centric, but how much of what you do is reactive versus proactive? And also, can you give examples of the two sides of that? Because publishing, again, it's a lot of recurring, reactive work, and then a lot of people don't realize there's a lot of proactive things that your publisher can do for you.
Right. let me put it in the framework of a dollar value of a song. What is the dollar lifetime value of a song? So when you imagine you are a writer, you write a song, you have a demo. So the first thing we do as publisher is we pitch it to the labels. And then when it gets cut, depending on the country, depending on due terms, that's something called first mechanical. The first time it ever got cut. Money number one. Then when it gets cut, it will be pressed. Obviously, there's distribution. Distribution can be your physicals, age revealing, vinyl, cassette, CD. But now we also, vinyl is on the comeback, so we do have physical distribution as well. But we also have a bunch of the digital side. Ringtone, ringback tone is coming back too. The digital distribution, it could be your a la carte download, your streaming, your AVOD, your SVOD. So all of that is the distribution end of it. So the distribution end, I would say, is a bit of both. Once you get started, the money just flow in. So you will be a little bit of a starting point. But unfortunately, this is the part that a lot of the platform or the distribution end will have to work with sizable size. So which means if Arica write one song and I want to press one CD, or distribute one song into Tencent, Spotify, Apple, you might struggle to get there. So you will have to work with a company, whether it's a distributor, whether it's an aggregator, or so on, or Geek Live can help you.
Connect you to distributors.
Exactly. So you will have, for the publishing end, you will come to us. And then that's the distribution. Then I think the tail end is when the song is out there, you have the concert, you have the touring. When the song is famous, what else? So that will come the brand and licensing. So for instance, if I want to use your song as an OST in a musical, Cotchin. If you want to put as a TVC, Cotchin. I love all of that. So there's a lot of songs that is always earning money. Google, Fly Me to the Moon, that's one of our top seller. So all of that, you can see that it has a different timeline. It's actually the dollar lifetime cycle of a song. But what is amazing is it goes way into a full circle because Backstreet's back. So now it goes into, right? So now it goes into, hey, let's do adaptation. Let's sell it to Deadpool, So it never dies. It's actually just go in circle. And it really depends on the momentum. We like this. We are geeks because we were like, oh my God, 90s back. Bring back S Club 7. We sort of have a hint about all that, you know what I mean? So we like that. So I think putting the pause on the, so first of all, what is reactive and what is proactive would be at the beginning pitching, because labels, we have the context that would be very proactive. And I think the distribution and the starting will be proactive, and then it gets into reactive. The brands licensing and then all the bigger campaigns, those are very, very proactive. And then when again back to just a dormant, a song maybe lying there for 10 years, that will be the magic of what a publisher does, because we have an acumen about now it's the 90s. And we are going to pick up all the 90s and call all the brands and say, hey, Pepsi Cola, don't you think this is coming back? So that's kind of what we do. They're all nodding because they were like, yeah.
Yeah, bring it back.
That's Backstreet's
Like all of our generation here on the channel.
I'm impartial. It's not our catalog, but I'm just saying, So that's both the proactive and the reactive. I will elaborate a little bit further because I think the collection, the distribution is what people know of a publisher. But what people do not know is whether, can I say how the sausage is made? The
What goes into the sausage? I don't know.
Making of the music. Today, as we speak, this week, we have like 200 over writers from all around the world congregating in Vegas, where we have our Warner Chappell flagship song camp. And those are the things that we do. We bring a lot of writers together. And it's not just Chappell, it's also Warner Music Label. And Atlantic, we have all our labels together. As Warner Music Group, we put them together in a song camp or writing sessions. And, amazing music come out of it. I would say that's my favorite part of the job. Unfortunately, these are the things that is cut but not released yet, and I can't tell you. But I love this job because I can wear the T-shirt that says, I listen to music that you don't even know exists yet.
Ooh.
I love it. So yeah, that would be what I think is the best kept secret about publishers. No one know we do that,
Ooh, so much power. I love it. Okay,
It's
last
fun.
quick one is what can writers do to help publishers help them?
I would say, be honest and be open with us. Because we are all humans, before you are a writer, before you are a celebrity, you are a person first. So we are almost like a therapist to some of our partners because it's just life. If you've been writing 100 songs for the last 10 years very smoothly, in Chinese we say your pen is really smooth. It just come out, blah, 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 blah. One day it stop. There's no why. That's the writer's block. And it happens. And we spend a lot of time talking to our writer, where they are now, momentum-wise. Where do you want to be? Are you bored of this sound that you're working on? Do you want to go and collaborate with other people? So be honest with us. We're not here to judge. We actually just want to help, to push you. Yeah, sometimes we will say, if you write this kind of music, a lot of people will like it.
90s are back.
Yeah, like Backstreet's back. Come on. So I would say number one. Number two is, this goes back to individual personality and DNA. But personally, I never say no. Try it before you knock it. Try it and you said you don't like it. What makes you think a person who is writing rock cannot write bossa nova? You never tried it. Maybe somehow in our producer years, you would say, yeah, why not? Afro beats and K-pop, we think they sound alike. I think there's some magic in that. So we always encourage people to try writing with different people, writing different kind of sound, collaborating, which is your very first question, with different platform. Yep. Maybe one day Adele can collab with a TikToker. You never know. So why not? And I think we call them the new world, but it is not. This is just the world it is today.
It is today's world. Yes,
it is
very
today's
good,
world.
nice.
And the last thing I will point out is, and I learned it from my years in tech, I would say, credit to them. We have to understand what music has become and what music is. Yes, it's a vehicle of my emotions. If I would like to tell you that I love Beatles and Beatles is cool, but we also need to understand there's a very big population group here, Gen Z, Alpha. They are using music as a form of communication, their emotion. I am sad today. I'm going to put a reel that is sad music because I am sad today. But if I'm happy and I'm in my sweet 16, no matter how well I like this breakup song, I'm not going to post it. I might post it tomorrow, but I'm not going to post it today. So this is a little bit of a mental switch that we have to acknowledge. What is music being used? But I still think music is as music is, even if it's a vehicle of your emotions. And I think it's all valid. So
love it.
Power to Alpha.
Yes, wonderful. My gosh, what a great way to end. Thank you all so much, David, Susan, Arica. This is a really fun and exciting conversation about music rights and why they
Cha-ching.
matter, hopefully. Cha-ching. Yes.
Cha-ching.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.